The one animal that had just been engulfed in eternal fire upstairs had already spread fire to dozens of Black Panthers. Eternal flower doesn't move as intended. Sarah has reached the area she was hoping for, but you can't control your fire? That can't happen, so cut it quickly. Just make a very light scratch. What I heard from Vale after discovering eternal flower. Naturally, the original eternal fire is a fire that moves according to Jin's will. If the Jin wants to burn, it will burn unquenchable even if he dies, and if it wants to die, it will die out immediately. But now eternal flower has already deviated from that rule since the first Black Panther. A much bigger fire was formed than Jin wanted. Eternal flower did not completely ignore Jin's will. However, it was not completely controlled as usual. There were far more fires that took hold and spread randomly than those that were extinguished by Jin's will. Did you prepare for it after seeing Brother Deepu's suffer from eternalization? It was accurate. The evil spirit was taking advantage of eternal flower's never extinguishing characteristic. The evil spirit did not know exactly to what level Jin could completely control eternalization, but he was confident that it would never be infinite. Therefore, if he deliberately used the chaos and the resentment that Jin had against him as a catalyst to multiply, it seemed like he could put pressure on Jin, and the plan was working perfectly. Even he cannot know how deep and huge Jin's grudge against the evil spirit is. That resentment was making eternal fire burn more fiercely. Even now the resentment is only growing bigger and bigger, so it is impossible to stop so many eternal flames from spreading. Moreover, the terrible disappearance of young Rosa had just made Jin even more angry. Whoa! Kihiing! Every time the screams of the Black Panthers were heard, the ground melted piece by piece. As soon as the party arrived at the third basement floor, they were already isolated as everything had melted even though they had done nothing. We also saw black leopards falling to the next floor one by one. They must be burning the eternal flame again and melting the lower classes. If it continues to fall like this, is there an evil spirit at the bottom? There was no choice. This is because the fire cannot be stopped from growing and it cannot rise again. The group had no choice but to continue throwing themselves downward like before. Jin briefly explained to his colleagues that eternalization was out of control and his speculations as to why. I wasn't using eternalization. For now we have no choice but to go down while holding on to each other. I got it right. Don't blame yourself. It was something that could not be helped. And I think even if you hadn't used eternalization, those Black Panthers would have continued to pressure us in one way or another. Perhaps the evil spirit has prepared to continue regenerating even after death until you use eternalization. Hito said. I saw a really great sword. If you had been in my era, the battle of the Guardian of the Holy Kingdom would have been much easier. However, the 12 horsemen feel that the evil spirit's plan is a bit strange. What do you mean? The spirit of the evil spirit is not infinite. This is an area I can know for sure because I was trapped inside him. How much soul do you think it takes to make one black leopard? I'm not sure, but I'm sure we'll need quite a bit. They are burning them by the hundreds and thousands. The eternal fire that Jin can control is limited, and the soul energy that the evil spirit can use is also limited. So I think maybe the evil spirit is using eternalization to get us into trouble, and at the same time testing himself. I wonder if he can handle the eternal flower that has grown to its limit. Why would a bastard do such a thing? Wow! Hito shook his head at Octavia's voice. Considering your obsession with Jin, I think you're a guy who can do that, Captain Rage. Even if it's not necessarily a test of myself, I might just want to watch Jin's sword. I think so too. Everyone hold on tight to each other. The ground is disappearing now. By that time, the entire third basement level had completely melted. The Black Panthers had all gone downstairs and were out of sight. Jin began to fall again, but fear was slowly but deeply filling inside him. Of course, fighting against evil spirits was not something to be afraid of. What if this eternal fire continues to proliferate and causes damage to our allies? The people currently with you are not a problem. Not only are there a small number of them, but each one of them is of transcendental ability. However, it was a completely different story when the eternal flower multiplied and attacked our troops who were wandering around here. Vale said that even Orgel would not be able to turn off the eternal flame as he wished. The moment eternal fire strikes our allies at this speed, devastating damage is inevitable. Those thoughts disturbed Jin's mind throughout the fall. I felt like I had a thorn stuck in my throat because I thought I would have expected this to be a bad thing. It was not easy to shake off the feeling that I was playing in the palm of the hand of an evil spirit. Surely, this fight was different from other times. Since returning, I have defeated countless enemies and have never been shaken this much. Unlike just before, the descent did not end quickly. The speed at which the Black Panthers melted the ground seemed to be faster than the speed at which the group fell. It was clear that we were continuing to head downward. The longer the descent, the more the group felt that their auras and magic organs were becoming clogged. The feeling was even more severe as most of them were seriously injured. In the end, Octavia was the first to lose consciousness. Hito and Alpin were clearly breathing harder, and even Bianca, who had suffered the least damage, sometimes let out long sighs to catch her breath. In the meantime, the superhumans never relaxed their grip on each other. Jean continued to think. How can we protect our allies? Among the fallen allies were most of the people he cherished more than anything else. Perhaps the labyrinth called the Castle of the Evil God may have already moved Eternal Flower to where her companions are. Every time I imagined them burning to death on the eternal flame, I got goosebumps all over my body. Even if I tried not to remember it, it was as if someone had drawn the scene directly into my head and implanted it in me, but I couldn't stop. Can I protect them all? Can everyone go back without dying? Even before I start the direct battle with the evil god, I am already falling into this helpless trap. Bad thoughts tend to get worse. The more difficult the situation and the more scary things were, the more so it was. 12 horsemen. What are they doing? Alpin suddenly opened his mouth. He was losing consciousness and coming back again and again. Lord Alpin. Squeeze your hands tighter. You shouldn't have less strength than I am when I'm tired. Alpin's words gave Jean the answer. I'm not protecting them alone. We protect each other. This was something I had already realized once during the skirmish in the inner world. I just forgot about it for a moment due to the urgency of the situation. I'm glad that someone like my ancestor remains. Once again my mind became clear all at once. Every time Jin's chaotic inner self was sorted out in this way, he felt like he was escaping the evil spirits one step at a time. There is Valeria on our troop side. She might be able to sense the crisis of eternalization first using recording magic. The same was true for Baradin, who had recently learned pseudo-record magic, and beings like Orgel and Vale were able to minimize damage to allies. Dante could have created an intangible sword wind to check the approaching eternal flower. Quicantel could have used his power to buy some time, and Sirius's full ice could have sealed the eternal flower. Or even if nothing can stop eternalization, somehow our allies and colleagues will try to escape from eternalization. Not only because I wanted to survive, but because I didn't want to hurt Jean. In order not to fall into the sorrow of having killed each other. With that mindset, I will run away. It was a battle that could never be won without trusting one's colleagues and oneself. Even if it was temporary, we also had to trust our allies for today. That was what Jean lacked the most. Right before the decisive battle, Jean had been fighting a war of nerves with them about the war that would take place after the death of the evil spirit. Even if from tomorrow the hostile relationship would end only when one side was destroyed, for today we had to sincerely give up our backs and fight against them. Without realizing it, Jin's expression, which had been distorted by internal pain, was gradually returning to normal. That's how the fall ended. The first thing Jean saw as he landed on the ground with a sword wind was the ground completely engulfed in hazy fire. Black Panthers were burning everywhere. It was a much smaller number than what Jean saw on the third basement floor. It was unclear whether the rest had all been reduced to ashes by eternalization or had fallen into another part of the maze. The floor no longer melted. That meant that the party, after a long fall, had finally reached the lowest level of the evil god's castle. Isn't this the center of the lowest floor? The flames are getting bigger the further you go there. Jean looked in the direction where the eternal flower grew bigger and bigger. Hito carried Octavia and the one-armed squadron matriarch, and Bianca carried Alphin. As Jean began to walk, the eternal flower split into two sides, forming a path. It felt like the lights were talking to me and giving me directions. Jean walked through his own fire like that. I wonder how much area eternal fire had burned, but even after walking for a long time the flames only grew stronger. A faint aura, magic power and golden power could be felt from afar. His colleagues fell to the lowest level a little faster than Jean. However, Jean did not become impatient. It seemed unlikely that his colleagues would have died in eternalization. Still, I walked faster. Like a barley field blowing in the wind, the flames swayed and opened a path, and after a while Jean was able to face the allied fleet surrounded by the eternal flower. Like a tidal wave, a huge eternal fire was rushing through the allies. There was a black spirit mixed in between the fires, and as Jean got closer the spirit seemed to retreat to the fire on the other side of Jean. Jean intuitively recognized that there was an evil spirit there. In that wall of black fire where the retreating spirit clings. Eventually Jean opened the fire on his side, revealing his comrades who were struggling inside to push away eternal fire. They assumed that the spirit was invading from the open fire and immediately took an attack stance, but when they confirmed that it was Jean they sighed in relief. There were quite a few people who sat down as if they had barely been able to stand up until now. "Is this Jean Runkendal?" It was Orgel's voice. He was completely devastated and could barely maintain his broken shield. I was in a state where I couldn't even look at the losing side. If Jean had been a little later, if only he had regained his composure sooner. The vortex of eternalization that was trapping his comrades would have killed them all as if it were catching bugs in a fist. "Yes, this is the 12th horseman, Jean Runkendal. I will join you again from now on." As Jean entered the curtain of fire, the eternal fire that had been squeezing his allies stopped moving. The huge storm that surrounded the entire fleet stood still as if time had stopped. The allies opened their eyes wide and looked alternately at the solid wall of fire and Jean. In this era, the blue fire symbolizes Jean Runkendal. Therefore, the allies thought that since Eternal Flower was attacking them, some kind of problem must have arisen with Jean. They could not help but think that Jean had already been harmed somewhere underground in this castle, had been absorbed by the evil god, or had become a puppet of the evil god and was attacking them. It was only natural that the storm of eternalization was not directed at the evil spirit but was tightening on the allies. But thoughts and hearts are different. The temporary alliance was believed without considering the situation. Even if Jean has a problem, he will ultimately be the one to solve the problem. That belief was now becoming a reality. 12 horsemen. The 12 horsemen have arrived. Even those who collapsed from exhaustion screamed with all their remaining strength. Hito and Bianca carried the wounded who had been fighting on the losing side the whole time. Among them, Octavia appeared to be regenerating under the energy of the demon stone even before the healers arrived. "Father?" And Tasha, who was pushing Eternal Flower from the ground, ran towards Alpin screaming without realizing it. "Tasha, you didn't give in to the evil spirit either. After I recover a little I will go back to fight, so stay where you are." "Yes, father." The one-armed squadron head was taken over by medical staff from Songguk. Jean changed his sword and moved forward. Sigmund's pale blade gleamed blue in the darkness. Eternal Flower completely stopped its progress, but the soul energy mixed in it was heading to one place like a swarm of insects. It was on the other side of Jean where the chest was. It seemed as if I could see the dark, gigantic form of the evil spirit hidden in eternal flame and spirit. "Jean." Valeria came next to Jean. She took out a red sphere that looked like a red jade from her bosom and held it out to Jean. "I finished checking the relationship between you and me. I was concerned that the castle of the evil spirit was a kind of subspace, but fortunately it can operate normally here as well." Jean nodded as he received the sphere. "However, the stability issue has not been confirmed. I can only hope that the spatial characteristics of this place do not cause any side effects. So if you think there's any problem while using it, come see me immediately." Jean nodded. "Thank you for your hard work, Valeria. You probably played a big role in preventing our allies from being eternalized." As Jean said, Valeria was most responsible for the fact that the allies who were away from Jean did not suffer much damage from eternalization. Just like the losers, they also experienced several sudden falls and space shifts, and if it weren't for Valeria's recording magic in the process, they would have suffered incomparable damage to what they are now. Valeria's face was gaunt. In order to save her temporary ally, she had used recording magic, even risking her magic organ being destroyed by the reflux. Fortunately, permanent damage was avoided. If it was Valeria before she met Jean, so to speak, she would never have risked her own safety to save a temporary ally. Even more so if Jeep is included in that alliance. But now she also had company. There were people I wanted to protect even at the cost of my life, and there were people who were gradually changing my life, which had been filled with duty and revenge as a hister, into something more colorful. Thanks, Jean said, reading her inner thoughts. Valeria didn't like that he recognized her feelings. Don't get hurt. You also. Our troops were reorganizing their ranks. Although there were only about 60% of the fleet left compared to the beginning, the remaining flagships, including Kojak and Granil, were all intact. I will open the way, prepare for battle. As Jin's booming voice rang out, the frozen eternal flowers began to stir again. However, this time, rather than strangling our allies, we headed towards the evil body that was hiding the soul. Those gathered here had never seen such a huge fire move according to the will of only one person. Even those who have experienced Kiliak's full force firsthand. Are you sure you can control all that fire? Maybe even an evil spirit wouldn't be able to handle all this fire. Due to the nature of the power of eternalization possessed by the 12 horsemen, that would be impossible. Those watching could not help but be astonished. Originally, Jean could not fully control an eternalization of this size. In the first place, it was impossible to form an eternal flame that could surround the fleet. It became abnormally large due to its grudge against the evil spirit and his spirit. However, just as the evil spirit used Jin's grudge to force the eternal flower to multiply, now Jin's will to protect his friends and Jin's will to survive and fight together until the end is what drives eternal flower. Spiritual energy erupted from within the black curtain like an active volcano, but the flames of eternal flame were even stronger. Spiritual energy and eternal fire collided, causing endless explosions. Eventually, the spirit of marriage began to decline. There was a hole in it. As eternal flower began to furiously dig into the gap, the curtain was torn apart at high speed. Ah! A shock wave spread along with a roar that was clearly the scream of a vicious body. The shock wave was strong enough to push away even the eternal flower that covered the curtain. Jean momentarily flinched and stopped walking. Behind their backs, the Allies' protective shield exploded and fragments flew out. More than 80% of the protective shield covering the entire fleet was broken. With just one scream, the evil body writhed in agony. The Allies felt a chill on the back of their necks at that fact and deployed their protective shield again. Ah! Every time the evil spirit screamed, the protective shield was broken. In an instant, most of the power sources on the ship became hot enough to explode, and the wizards attached to the power sources fainted continuously. Replacements continued to be made without even taking care of those who had fallen. The moment the power source loses magic, even for a moment, the entire ship will suffer fatal damage. The dragons and the knights on the ground were in a similar situation. That meant that the evil spirit had the power to kill them all just by screaming. Also, on the contrary, it also meant that eternalization was definitely inflicting a blow to the evil spirits. Therefore, the Allies were eagerly hoping. I hope that eternal fire will put an end to the evil spirit like this. I hope that this terrible fight will end like this. After enduring this pain, I hope that when I look beyond the torn curtain, I will see the shapeless image of the evil body burning away. But there was no way the evil spirit would end like this. Jean withstood the shock wave and moved forward. In the end, he was convinced that to end the fight, he would have to plunge the blade into the beast's neck. Pa! After about 10 seconds, the veil of soul energy was completely torn. As if a door was opening, the curtain was divided into left and right, and eternal fire rushed into it like a tidal wave. Finally, Jean was able to face the hidden evil spirit. Is this a hideous body? The evil body looked completely different from Jin's memories. It looks like a huge ghost, not like it was when it was human or like a devil after being tainted by chaos. The evil body was floating in the air. It had a human-like shape, but its lower body was filled with black smoke instead of legs. Hundreds of arms were holding every type of sword that existed in this world, and the eye holes where the pupils should be were just empty. That Gleek? Isn't that the king of the Black Sea? The allies were freaking out. As they expressed, the evil spirit resembled Gleek, the king of the Black Sea who was awakened during the Sword Emperor Crusade. Their faces turned white as they remembered the nightmare of that day. It seemed as if the monster that almost destroyed the entire world had reappeared under the name of the evil god. The evil spirit was enduring the eternal fire that enveloped its entire gigantic body. Even though his entire body was burning, the evil spirit was no longer screaming. I was curious. The empty eyes of the evil spirit reached Jean. Is the fire you have truly unquenchable or something that can't be stopped? Jin's eyes widened. This was because the eternal flower that surrounded the evil body was slowly fading away. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case. It's a really good sword, but it's not enough to kill this mother. Jean glared at the evil spirit. But I will praise you. After killing the ghosts of my family, watching the last of my humanity disappear, and burning everything that was my name as a knight, you finally arrived at me. It wasn't just ghosts. There were 3 ancestors whom you could not subjugate. Moreover, there will still be more such ancestors left. Still not sure? Your strength is not absolute. FZZS. Brain energy was gathering in Jin's optical heart. Rosa twitched her lips as she felt the power. It was a smile that no one could recognize because the shape of the mouth was so bizarre. Now, youngest child, you die here. It is your family's turn to become the legend of this black land that I will rule from now on. It is you who dies, not me. And you will be remembered as the world's nightmare. I'll send you to where young Rosa Runkendal is waiting. Jean continued talking and broke the red sphere he was holding in his fist. Then all of a sudden the brain energy that had gathered in the optical heart began to shake as if it would explode. Immediately after the bead broke, Jean could feel the sense of a being reaching the ultimate point of nothingness. I could become that being. The Ming Dynasty's fighting spirit class. As the unity of the 2 gods unfolded, Jean and her inner self were connected. Brother Jean? How is this happening? Suddenly my brother's thoughts are reaching me. The union of 2 gods is taking place. Is this a coincidence like last time? It's not a coincidence, Brother Tushin. I'm sorry for borrowing my brother's help without warning. However, I thought I would be connected to Lingling first, but fortunately the Tushin brothers were connected first. In an instant, Ban read Jin's inner thoughts, understood the situation so far, and answered. I've been looking forward to a day like this. Brother Jean, let's fight together. It looks like Jean broke the sphere. Check out the La Perosa video. The location is believed to be Xinjiang. Is that person a fighting spirit? Yes, it's true. The female body is noticeably smaller than that of other Ming dynasties. It matches exactly what Jean drew. Looking at the shape of the mouth and the glowing heart, it seems like the merger of the 2 gods was successful. A remote island in Huffister. This is an uninhabited island where Jean escaped after completing the first Sword Garden offensive and accidentally experienced a connection with Lingling for the first time. Immediately after Jean broke the bead in the evil god's castle, the Jumsil tribe waiting here were screaming with great excitement. I know you're excited about your success, but everyone please lower your voice. It's distracting my Myoan friends from concentrating. Top said, raising his index finger to his mouth. The reason the Golden Snow tribe can now see La Perosa's video is thanks to the Myoan tribe's unique dimensional ability and the machine developed by Qual and Valeria. Next to the video, the Myoan people were chanting spells with their eyes closed. The top guy says the right thing. Everyone please focus and watch the video properly and report to me immediately if there are any problems. This body needs to adjust this from now on. Qual said as he sat down in front of a machine that looked like a giant organ. The video of La Perosa that the Golden Tooth tribe was watching was being transmitted from the other side of the machine. As Qual pressed the keyboard-like buttons, the transmitted video became clearer. On the other hand, if Qual did not press the button or miscalculated, the button became blurred. As the image becomes clearer, Jean and La Perouse's synchronization rate increases, and as it becomes blurry, it decreases. Wavelength Tracking Synchronizer. That was the official name of the red sphere and organ-shaped machine that Jean broke. As the name suggests, the wavelength tracking synchronizer was built on the technology used in the Spacetime device and the Red Owl. In addition, the information analyzing large-scale teleportation through chaos obtained during the last invasion of Rickalton played a major role. Tychon's ultimate goal using this device is of course to extract royalties from La Perouse. Currently synchronizing Jean and La Perouse is limited, and even that can only be done by installing a device directly on this uninhabited island. However, it was an invaluable help in the final battle. Sweat ran down Qual's forehead as he touched the button. There is a reason why adjustment is difficult, but he was confused by unexpected variables. The synchronization rate is excessively higher than the experimental value. Why? Is there something variable in the space called the Castle of the Evil God? A high synchronization rate means that Jean and Ban's merger is more likely to occur, but the probability of side effects also increases. The device was not as stable as Valeria had feared. The machine was getting hot, as if on fire. First of all, I have to adjust it as best as I can, and hope that the machine can hold out until Jean finishes the fight. Qual gritted his teeth and hit the button repeatedly. The video was becoming clearer. Jin's entire body turned blue. Even though he was just standing still, the brain energy flowing from his body was distorting his surroundings. In his appearance, rather than Jin's characteristic calm and cool feeling, he overflowed with a destructive atmosphere, as if he would annihilate his enemies without mercy. Is that a merger of two bodies and gods? Just like Sagaju, who used the demon godstone, he turns into a completely different person. The allies thought as they looked at Jin's back. Before the decisive battle began, the Bamul alliance had shared information about the Tushan Union with the temporary allies. The beast twitched his lips as he felt Jin's energy change drastically. Until now, whenever something unexpected happened while dealing with Jean, she felt a kind of pleasure. The only joy left in the world of evil spirits, which could not be more boring or more desolate, was the confrontation with Jean. Kang! With a sharp sound, Jean disappeared from everyone's sight. The speed is so fast that even the evil spirit misses Jin's location in an instant. Before I knew it, Jean had leapt onto the head of the evil spirit and was striking Sigmund. It interferes with the creation of auras with soul energy and disturbs the inner self with mental attacks. Such elements cannot work for Tushan. The current Jean was performing the unity of his faith and faith at a higher synchronization rate than ever before. A sword falling like thunder. At the same time, hundreds of arms attached to the body of the evil spirit wielded weapons. The swords, which were bigger than the pillars of the castle, moved quickly as if ignoring their mass. However, as soon as they touched Sigmund, the swords simply shattered like glass. Even if there were hundreds of swords that could destroy even Taishan in an instant, they could not stop Tushan's sword. Zara'a! The chest of the evil body opened wide. Black spirit poured out like blood and soaked the floor, and before Jean could even step on the wet ground, he turned his body in the air and swung his sword sideways. The body, whose body was split into crosses, retreated and let out a breath of soul. Therefore, every time Jean took a breath, the soul energy penetrated into him, but the fighting spirit blood and light heart did not allow the soul energy to accumulate in the body. I'm happy. The evil spirit vomited blood like exhaustion and laughed maniacally. The broken swords regained their original form and the cross-split body recovered. Jean didn't bother to chase after the evil spirit that widened the distance. Instead, he carried out the oppression of the Myeongwanganjum. As the brain energy condensed in Sigmund began to generate gravitational force, the entire space near his chest vibrated as if it would collapse. Then the huge body of the evil spirit was seen being dragged towards Jean. It was a strange scenery. All of the swords of the evil spirit were clinging to Jin's sword, which was standing still. The swords piled up, became entangled with each other, and broke apart indiscriminately, and Sigmund's brilliance grew darker. The brain energy flowing through the broken fragments was distorting the body of the evil spirit. It seemed like a huge hand was grabbing the body of the evil spirit and tearing it apart. The evil body, which had withstood the immense eternalization, was repeatedly cut and exploded at every moment. okay? Let's see if I can say I'm happy even when that dishonorable life is completely over. Changxiang among them, the one who was probably normal throughout history. Jin, who had become one with the fighting spirit class, was instantly overwhelming the evil spirits. Brother Jin, how long can we stay connected? I was told by the developer of the connected device that it would be about an hour, but I'm sure it would be less than that. My synchronization with Brother Tushin is much higher than what he said. The time the device can withstand will inevitably become shorter. In addition, the synchronization rate continues to increase in real time. In fact, the unity of the two gods is clearer than when the brothers were in La Perosa. The evil spirit has not yet revealed its full power. It is difficult to quickly estimate the total amount of power possessed by the evil spirit even with half the senses. But there was no time for exploration. It was necessary to deal as much damage to the evil spirit as possible while maintaining the unity of the two gods. First, let's destroy it until the author can't play it. The force of oppression began to soar rapidly. Now the body was twisted as if it would be completely absorbed into Sigmund's sword body. It was literally on a different level from the oppression Jin had used so far. The purpose of oppression was originally to simply limit the opponent's movements, but anti-oppression itself had the power to capture and crush the opponent. This is also a shocking sword, but wouldn't it be enough to kill this mother? The blows inflicted on the body have long since lost their meaning to me. Soul energy surged like brain water from the empty eye sockets of the distorted face of the evil body. The spirit that erupted like that flowed across the floor like a torrent heading towards the allies behind Jin. Without needing to confirm at this concentration, people like Jin, who are not tolerant, will immediately suffer severe radiation exposure just by brushing against it. Fortunately, most of them evaporated into Jin's brain and disappeared somewhere. The spirit aircraft that passed through Jin could not penetrate the superhuman secret aircraft and fleet bombardment. However, the evil body was becoming more enlarged every time soul energy was poured out of the body. Even before it got bigger, it was only outwardly intimidating and not in a form suitable for battle. Even if it gets bigger, it's no use against me and my half-brother. Then, after a few seconds, Jin figured out what the evil spirit was thinking. It's half-brother self-destruction. It's like trying to self-destruct. Jin and Ban spoke at the same time. As the body of the evil spirit grew, the battlefield became narrower. All of the spirit that makes up this castle is being returned to the evil spirit. Of course, it is not self-destruction in the true sense. The evil spirit planned to explode its infinitely enlarged body and infect everyone here with chaos. The only person who can survive the explosion is Jin, who has immunity. Puha, isn't it time for the bridesmaids to disappear? So that nothing gets in the way of the fight between you and me. But I'm also looking forward to this time too. The evil spirit was making a voice full of joy. I plan to kill everyone who followed you by infecting them with chaos. How many of them can you save? Right after those words were finished, suddenly the ceiling was disappearing. The suddenly open sky was just black, and Jin and his allies soon found out why. That was not the sky but the underside of the ship Ram. Ram's main gun protruded like a hideous creature, its mouth wide open towards the ground. That one. Hurry up and put on a shield. In the narrow battlefield, there is no space to avoid Ram's main gun. And those who experienced the first general offensive knew very well that the fleet's protective shield was meaningless in front of Ram's main guns. Not only the main gun but also the soul energy explosion of the chest will be added. Even Orgel shook his head in embarrassment. There was nothing Orgel could do about the fact that the main gun was hit directly in this state. The best decision he could make was to take refuge in the steel gate with the most important people. However, Jin looked down somewhere on the body of the body attached to Sigmund and answered like this. Entire. As soon as the answer was given, Sigmund's brain energy, which had formed oppression, was transformed. The king's rain sword. The mystery of surrender was beginning. The 10th sword of the king's sword fighter. Myingwang rain sword, opening. As soon as the mystery began to unfold, the darkness cleared. People covered their eyes with their hands and turned their heads, and the black body of the evil body was engulfed in blue light, leaving only an outline. That huge body was buried in light and lost its shape. Even the lower part of the ram that was blocking the sky looked pure white. The light made it impossible for viewers to open their eyes, and the heat that melted even chaos was so intimidating that they could not move their bodies. As each second passed, all of those phenomena amplified. Even the black smoke rising from the corpse's burning body was obscured by the light and disappeared without a trace. If the god of light existed, it seemed as if he was descending on this very spot. If Jin hadn't released the season of Brother Guardians of Death Battle King Rinpa together. From the moment the Maingwang Rain Sword began, more than 50% of our troops would have been dead or dying. Our soldiers were astonished as they found out. The sword of the day when the family head was declared. A hunch that Jin's youngest son would truly realize what he said he would do to save everyone. The evil body was engulfed in the sensation that the heart of its human days, which had already disappeared, was being immersed in madness. Did they say that blows to the body have lost their meaning? Jin was conveying the words of Ban spreading within him to the evil spirit. Even the true gods who truly transcended the physical body and existed intangibly were torn apart by my sword. This body has already tried to kill God. Don't you dare pollute my brother's world, the world to which we must return. The moment Ban continued talking, the body of the evil spirit exploded, creating a storm of soul energy in the realm of the Emperor's reigning sword. The spirit was covering Jin's body, which was shining black and white. Also, the entire castle of the evil spirit was scattered with souls. Not only is the body enlarged to the limit, but even the sex is dispersing with the spirit encroaching on all directions. Even those who were protected by the Emperor's reigning sword and the Brother Guardians were all covered in spirit energy. However, soul energy could not penetrate into it. It was because of lack of power. Even though he had accumulated so much despair and became a god, the evil spirit was unable to pierce Ban's sword. Perhaps the total amount of power itself may be greater than half. What is lacking is depth and will. And the reason why we must fight and win. Quaya! Immediately after the evil spirit exploded, the center of the light that filled the sky split. Black energy began to fall as if the sky was falling apart as the gap was torn apart. Ram's main gun gave out its spirit. The main gun that people experienced during the first general offensive was a miracle that could not be avoided or blocked. A huge force that could level a city to the ground in just a few seconds was moving as fast as light. But now Ram's main gun has lost its speed. The thunder chi of the Emperor's reigning sword was forcibly slowing down the main gun's speed. The main gun was slowly coming down like an object sinking quietly into the water. Is that ship also a witch's? Yi Tushan brother. Breath. Jin's eyes widened and he held Sigmund tighter. Or so half did. As the synchronization rate continued to increase, Jin and Ban were now truly becoming one, not just in the name of the ultimate skill, Tushan unity. This was because the synchronization rate continued to increase. It's not like it's run directly by a witch, but it's unpleasant. Until just now, Jin had only given half a message to the evil spirit, but not anymore. As the fairy tale became more severe, Jin thought like a class and spoke like a class. Ban had just realized that fact and was on guard. I thought that if things continued like this, Jin's ego might collapse. The worry that he might accidentally steal and encroach on Brother Jin's body disturbed his mind for a moment. Brother Tushan. But as soon as I thought that, I heard Jin's voice from inside. Control of the body was completely transferred to Ban. Now Jin's ego was located deeper inside. Brother Jin, isn't it bothersome? This is the first time I knew that the subject of the investment trust merger could change. Yes, don't worry about me, just fight. I can hear Lingling's voice and I feel very comfortable. My ego won't collapse. Naturally, Jin had a perfect look at Ban's thoughts. It would have been possible even if it wasn't a merger of two gods and gods. Half smiled. I get it. It's unpleasant. The reason Ban thought that way when he saw Ram's main gun moving, albeit slowly, was no different. Ram was not completed. The evil spirit did not have the power of a witch, and Insen himself appeared. An incomplete relic left behind by a witch cannot dare to aim its gun at oneself as if it were a threat. You're so cocky. The 10th sword of the King's Sword Fighter. Maingwang Rain Sword War. As the roar of the dog died down, the second battle of Tusan we began. The true marching song of fighting spirit was ringing. Sigmund's solemn will to destroy the enemy without a trace was shining brightly. Then Ram's main gun, which was slowly falling, stopped moving. The darkness that had descended stopped and shrunk tightly. Ram's main gun completely stopped progressing? Lynn Milano has lost her authority. The evil spirit had already been aware of Rin's betrayal since the castle was built. All of Lynn's authority over Ram had been taken back before the castle was completed. When the temporary allies first arrived, the main gun did not work properly because they wanted to enjoy the entertainment. The purpose was simply to force the youngest and the allies into the castle and put them through an ordeal. But not now. Even the evil spirit could not contain his astonishment at the sight of Ram's main gun stopping. The evil spirit was convinced that there would never be a means of destruction more powerful than Ram's main gun in this world. Even Murakan, who was briefly summoned during the first general offensive, seemed to feel the burden of directly defending Ram's main gun. Even if it was Soren, it seemed impossible to completely cut down Ram's main gun. Every time the main gun was fired, the fleets of the temporary alliance were about to disappear one by one. The evil spirit's gaze briefly reached the sky. The allies in the Emperor's reigning sword and the Brother Guardian's brain chi also looked up at the sky. All that can be seen is the bombardment of Ram, which has stopped and is spread out like a curtain. However, a sound was heard in the ears of those looking up at the sky. A huge ship floating in the sky. And from even higher in the sky, a deep and gigantic thunderclap. A sign of thunderstorms hitting the ground. Crush. Ban swings Sigmund lightly. A scream came out from the evil spirit again. The body of the evil body had already scattered in the explosion, forming a storm of soul energy, and the screams of the soul echoed everywhere like a deafening sound. Each and every scattered soul energy forms a body of evil spirits. Most of the soul energy that formed Ram was also derived from her. In other words, Ram is also the body of an evil spirit. That was the reason why the evil spirit screamed. Thousands. Tens of thousands. Hundreds of thousands of stems. Thunder was hitting the ship Ram. The entire hull, which was nearly 10 ri in length, was being smashed and broken by the thunder sung by Tushan, the tremendous ship that had plunged humanity into despair. There was no room left for even a single bug to move on the ship. The thunder completely enveloped the entire vast area and even tore up the nearby air. Aya! The storm of spirit was twisted like a human being in pain twisting his body. Boom, 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 boom. Each time the thunder fell, the Ram shook back and forth, left and right, and was shattered. Finally, the evil spirit was overcome by a sense of crisis. A feeling I have never felt since I became a god. The intuition that we might be defeated, the anxiety that if things continue like this everything will soon be over, the fear of extinction. I feel fear. It was impossible. But it was happening. The sword isn't even fully open yet. There are a total of 3 results that make up the Myingwang Rain Sword. Rosa didn't know it, but she was instinctively recognizing it. It was because God's insight was showing. There is still a ridiculous possibility that the area of this brain energy can be expanded further. There is no object that dares to float above me. Ban said, extending his left hand upward. And when he clenched his fist, Ram's main gun, which had stopped, was crushed like paint. Ram's lower part, revealed through scattered artillery fire, was crushed as if something had grabbed it viciously. In fact, Ban's energy was gripping Ram's lower part. Soon Ban began to slowly lower his outstretched hand. As being pulled. Ram was being dragged around like an object that was just a little heavy. He was dragged in an unsightly manner, like a king being dragged down from his throne. At that point, even our allies were shocked. No, right after Ban appeared, there was a strange feeling of anxiety within the allies. If only the 12 horsemen could use that kind of power as they wish every time. The moment he makes even the slightest mistake, this world will end. It's a power that can overwhelm even evil spirits. Those who had been worried that the world would be destroyed by the evil power of the evil god just a moment ago were now afraid of the power of the fighting god. I was imagining the day when that power would become another evil spirit. However, colleagues who were not just allies were simply moved and thrilled. His colleagues pictured Jean becoming the guardian of this world with transcendent power. The ship Ram is already more than twice as close to the ground as before. The force pulling Ram became more expansive as time passed, and the thunder striking the upper part showed no signs of abating. The evil spirit was barely able to push away the fear. At this rate, it is only a matter of time before he and Ram disappear. There was no way the long-awaited fight could end in such vain. I have to find it. I have to find it. We must find something that can overcome this crisis. The evil spirit gathered his will and glared at Ban. I couldn't see a way, but I had to find it somehow. Just like the youngest always did in this desperate crisis. Now it was his turn to do what the youngest had always done. Jarrrrrrrr. Ram's lower body began to trample on the evil god's castle. Ban's left hand, which was pulling Ram, was trembling with enormous strength. Ka! Soon Ban shouted with enthusiasm and struck down his left hand violently, and Ram ended up crushing the evil spirit's castle and falling to the ground. The enormous volume and mass completely collapsed the evil god's castle. The evil spirit was trapped in the brain energy of the emperor's reigning sword and watched quietly. A series of shock and astonishment. The evil spirit looked at the fallen Ram and Ban alternately as if he couldn't understand. Ram was randomly broken. The main gun in the center of the lower part was completely distorted and lost its shape, and although the upper part was not visible, it was clearly cracked like a dry land. All of this happened just a few minutes after the merger of the two gods took place. Half of the cases were far beyond the common sense of those who had directly experienced Changxiang, including those with evil spirits. How on earth did the gods of the past achieve victory against that monster? The evil god was acknowledging that he was bound to be lower in rank than the highest gods. This was because he deliberately did not attain perfect godhood. If he were to become a true god, he would not be the head of Runkendal but would have to destroy the order that encompasses the world. However, even if it is imperfect, he has been convinced that since he has achieved godhood, nothing among mortals can be a threat to him. Until I met my current class. Even all of his compatriots would have been together at that time. Was it a mistake on my part to not receive true godhood in the first place? The evil spirit was becoming impatient. Just like when he decided to take the prophet's hand, he felt like walls were blocking him from all directions and constricting him. The brain energy of the emperor's rain sword was encroaching on the bodies of Ram and the demon god. The evil spirit watched closely to make sure that the brain energy did not get any bigger. Is it because if it gets any stronger, even our allies could be swept away? The reason why the brain energy did not fluctuate more than a certain amount was clear. This was because if it became more intense, even the temporary alliance could be swept away. In that case, they would have to use it to take hostages, but even that seemed impossible. There was no way the monster in front of me would play that kind of prank. You can't do it that way. I need to find something else. There was still some strength left. Even if you take everything out, you just won't be able to draw a picture that will win half of it. Should I attain full godhood even now? For that reason, it was painful to lose the power given to Dyphus. If that power had remained in the first place, it wouldn't have been pushed this far. Brother Jean said that even though you are his mother and enemy, you are a person to whom your brother can entrust you with the family for a while. But did he betray Brother Jin's trust just to gain this power? Barely? You are talking arrogantly about a subject that perished 1,000 years ago and is barely surviving on the youngest. Did you think it was all over already? The body of the evil spirit bound by the brain energy began to dissipate into smoke. I admit that I can't defeat you. But the youngest one must have been some kind of river god who summoned you. If my prediction is correct, I don't think it will last that long. Duration. That was the only weakness of the two gods' unity. You have to hold on until that time ends. In order to do that, I have no choice but to raise my status, even if it means overdoing it. Raise your status as a god and become closer to God. Since he had already lost Dyphus, it was impossible to transcend into a complete god, but he could strengthen his godhood by using Ram. That's a gamble even for an evil spirit. If you are not careful, your ego will be erased and you will become a deformed being with nothing left but a desire for destruction. In that situation, even if we win this fight, there is nothing left. The value of the family to be protected, the land to be ruled, and the power gained by paying such a high price will all lose their meaning. But there is no choice. The evil god who had been limiting humanity's options to Jean and his temporary alliance now found himself in a forced situation. Of course, Ban was able to see through the evil spirit's thoughts. Awakening is an act suitable only for humans. The brain power of the Emperor's reigning sword became even more ferocious. The body of the evil spirit was dispersing into smoke and was evaporating at a rapid rate. However, as the smoke continued to disappear, it continued to head toward Ram. Black spots were sprouting out one by one on the ram's hull, which was completely stained blue. Ban dropped lightning on the spots each time, but the speed at which the spots were created was faster. The spot signified the harmonization of the evil spirit and Ram. Just as Jean is uniting his body and body, the evil spirit is also becoming one with Ram. Becoming one with something and amplifying its power is not a blessing granted only to you, youngest child. Although it is said that one can never surpass one's class, an evil spirit is an evil spirit. It had potential. While she integrated herself into Ram, she constantly targeted the friendly fleet with her remaining soul energy. Even if you have the Emperor's Rain Sword, brotherly guardians, and a protective shield, you cannot fundamentally block the mental pollution caused by soul energy infiltrating. People infected with Hongi were coming in one after another. Even Orgel was protecting so many people that his entire body was gradually turning black. Don't worry about this, just fight. The allies couldn't bear to shout like that. While the soul energy alone was overwhelming, if the brain energy became stronger, the entire ally formation could collapse. That was also the basis on which the evil spirit could hastily decide on reconciliation. Deciding to fuse with the witch's ship simply means that what I need to destroy becomes one from two. However, Ban amplified his energy without any hesitation. Ban knew better than anyone that his allies could be swept away, but there was one reason he increased his strength. It was because I was confident. Even when the next chapter of the Maingwang Rain Sword unfolds, I am confident that I will never let any of my allies die, and I am confident that I can do that. The 10th Sword of the King's Sword Fighter. Maingwang Rain Sword Jia. Blue. As soon as the final stroke of the Maingwang Rain Sword began, a blue sea suddenly spread across the ground. It wasn't just an expression, the brain energy was just flowing like a gentle wave. The protective shield spread out in all directions, the soul piercing through it and the people standing beneath it. The combatant's brain energy, which was up to his ankles, was not taking any damage. The brain energy that was lapping like water did not have the destructive energy unique to the Maingwang sword. But everyone could see. What kind of power does that seemingly harmless brain machine possess? It seems to be enough to evaporate even the vast, endless ocean. Such immense power that cannot be explained. Ban stood tall in the middle of the waves of brain energy and made no movement. The spirits that were constantly clinging to Ram's hull were being gently sucked into the waves. No matter how much soul energy is absorbed, the sea of fighting spirit does not become turbid. Rather, it only became brighter and clearer. If I lowered my head, my face could be seen. People were so fascinated by the light that they unconsciously fixed their eyes on the sea of brain energy. The ground and the air were contrasting. Ram lying low in the air was so dark that it seemed as if it would swallow up all the light that existed in the world, and the sea of brain energy that covered the ground was so brilliant that one could even forget for a moment that this was a battlefield where the survival of humanity was at stake. The results of Yonghua and Maingwang Rain Sword were being completed almost at the same time. The evil spirit was reaching the final stage of reconciliation. Runkendel's ego, which he tried to protect without becoming a perfect god, was completely shaken and was on the verge of extinction. On the other hand, Tushin was confident of victory. Immediately after opening the knot, I felt that Jin's voice that had been coming from inside me had disappeared. "Brother Jin." There was no answer. Even though I called him several times, Jin had no response at all. "Half. Jin is disappearing." Instead, Lingling's voice came through. Even that voice sounded infinitely distant and small. Ban could intuitively tell that something was wrong. The reason Lingling's voice was low was because he was barely holding on to Jin's ego, which had been pushed to the deepest part of the class. Lingling is doing her best to prevent Jin's ego from completely disappearing. Tusen Hapil is a martial art that borrows the power of Tusen. But now Jin had gone beyond that and was in a state where it was as if he had descended upon the god of fighting through his own body. Synchronization rate. The cause was the unification rate that continued to rise for no reason from the moment the investment trust merger began until now. The synchronicity is reaching its peak, and in the end it is reaching the result where Ban unexpectedly takes Jin's body, and not only that but also erodes his ego. That was instantly disturbing Ban's mind. If things continue like this, the evil spirit will definitely be extinguished, but Jin will also have no choice but to disappear along with it. You can't use more force. This idiot won't last. No, he can't hold on anymore, but I'm just holding on to him. Half of my eyes were closed. Is it right to stop like this? Would Brother Jin really want that? The sea of brain energy was also showing an unstable flow along the inside of Ban, which was in disarray as if a storm had arrived. Soon half of the decision was made. Lingling, from now on concentrate your mind and read Brother Jin's will. What? This means confirming what Brother Jin wants. What is he saying? How can he read something like that while he's being sucked into Ban's unconsciousness? You can do it. I'm holding on to Brother Jin. Hurry! Lingling followed Ban's words while holding on to Jin. Really, the strength of the snout and grip holding Jin is loosening. He continued to feel Jin's will being transmitted to his inner self in a very small way. Jin was conveying his clear will even while more than 90% of his ego was buried. Keep going? Hey, then you search. It will disappear without a trace. As soon as Ban heard those words, he tightened his grip on the sword. Then he glared at Ram, who had become one with the evil spirit, and said this. If Brother Jin said that, it means that he can bear it. No matter how painful it is, I will not let you kill my brother. I will follow Brother Jin's will. Jin's appearance was changing. A tail shining with brain energy sprouted, his hair became long enough to cover his shoulders, and his eyes had the depth of a king who had reigned as the absolute king of royalties for a long time. It was becoming a Suicide Squad itself. It was the result of Jin's ego completely sinking into Ban's unconsciousness. Lingling did not take her eyes off the puddle in Ban's inner world, where Jin disappeared. No matter how much I think about it, this isn't it. If things continue like this, soon that idiot's ego will disappear completely. So we have to finish it as quickly as possible. Ban nodded heavily. Even though it was a decision made with trust in Jin, continuing the reign of the emperor was clearly a risky choice. So as Lingling said, I had to do my best to put an end to the evil spirit at once. A roar that announces that a dog has become the king of light. His determination to annihilate his enemies. A sword that transcends the limits of mortality. For example, you can cut down God. When brain power reaches its peak, it becomes whiter than anything else. The brain energy that had colored the ground faded to pure white and began to swirl. The brain energy swirling around the room was filled with sacred energy and was absorbing order. The sound was the first to disappear into the sea of brain energy. The roaring sound created by the fusion of the evil spirit and the human being, the bizarre friction sound of a huge black mass of flesh mixing with the machine, the screaming sound of the evil spirit as its ego is torn apart by the pain, the breathing and sighs of astonishment of the people watching all of this become a storm of soul. A sharp crackling sound. I was trapped in the sea of brain energy floating around the area. Although there were hundreds of ships and hundreds of people moving around, the only one who could make or hear a sound was Tushin. Then the sight disappeared. The brain energy that glowed so hotly that it seemed as if it would burn the retina was closing the eyes of everyone in it. Even when I close my eyes or open them, all I see is a breathtaking whiteness. Floating blurry in it was Ban's afterimage. Even if the standing position was different or the direction the head was facing was different, everyone saw the same scene. Every single person was looking at the blurry back of the class. He was looking at a lamp that gave him faith that it would protect him from anything. On the other hand, the evil spirit saw Ban's face. Just by facing it, my whole body moved, and I felt as if the life I had passed up until now would be completely torn apart. Its fierce eyes were clawing at the soul of an evil spirit. The sound has disappeared, so I can't even scream. The evil body just opened its mouth like a fish. The last thing that disappeared was time. Everything trapped in the brain was at a standstill. Among the allies, even Quicantal and Enya, who were under Ulta's protection, could not escape the absolute interference. Ulta is afraid. The two even felt that Ulta was overcome with fear. The god of time was unable to overcome the strange phenomenon caused by a mortal sword. I was walking thoughtfully through a half-still world. In the white, only Sigmund's pale blade glowed dimly like a ghost. And every time Sigmund moved, the sea of brain energy rose up accordingly. When the sword points upward, the sharp flesh of the sea extends together, and when the sword points downward, the soaring brain energy all subsides. It looked like a huge whale was jumping out of the water. Each time the whale struck along with the sword, a piece of ram was torn apart. Or disappeared. When the brain energy that formed the body touched it, it evaporated, as if being washed in water. It was disappearing without being able to be returned to either a ram or an evil spirit. Quiet slaughter. Those who watched the scene had to think of such a strange expression. The evil spirit that had colored the whole world with despair was being revealed in eerie silence. The other half just performed the sword dance with a calm expression on their faces. The despair of the evil spirit was accumulating amidst the infinitely elegant trajectory left behind by Sigmund. Am I saying that this Rosa Runkendal was such an insignificant being? In the end, an uncontrollable sense of defeat welled up inside the evil spirit. Nothing. There was nothing I could do. Even while his body and soul were cut by Sigmund, he was able to almost end his harmony with Ram. She gained a stronger godhood without losing her identity as Rosa Runkendal. But what good is that? Even if I merge with Ram 1,000 times, I cannot defeat that monster. It was absolutely hopeless to defeat Ban unless he became a perfect god, the highest among them. I felt like I was going crazy. I couldn't admit it. The fact that he was wrong, that even the power he gained by giving up so much could not help this situation, that it had to end like this. It wasn't something I couldn't admit, because I was aware from the beginning that there could be something in the world with greater power than myself. What the evil spirit really couldn't admit was the fact that this wasn't a fight between him and the youngest. What she risked her entire life to fight against was not the leader of a great race that disappeared 1,000 years ago, but her youngest son. Tushin was ruining the fight now. Either lose or win. The end of this fight had to be the responsibility of himself and the youngest. If it was just a line of lending strength, I could understand it, because he also accepted the power of chaos. But fighting a monster that didn't have a single part of my youngest child left was a terrible thing. She also did not completely abandon her identity as Rosa Runkendal. By the time the evil spirit thinks that far. Ban's Mianwang rain sword was facing towards the middle. Ram had the appearance of an archipelago formed by the division of a continent. The Tenri long hull was completely destroyed. Like the sea snow scattered by the death of a huge sea creature, the bodies of Ram and the evil spirit were completely torn into pieces and scattered into particles. The evil spirit was able to see a ray of goodness that was like the light of salvation. What is that line? A red line appeared behind Ban's back. The red line, which had been completely invisible until now, was naturally connected to Ban's body, as if it had been there from the beginning. Soon an intuition struck the evil spirit. The same connection point that the youngest member cut when dealing with Runtia. The line that assimilates Jean and Ban. The identity of the red line could only be that. Why didn't I think of that? If I cut that line, Tushin can no longer stick to the youngest. The reason the fighting spirit was summoned in the first place must have been because of the medium called goodness. It felt like my heart was pounding in my chest, which had disappeared without even a shape. There was hope. The thrilling feeling that Jean had as he stretched out his hand to grab the hope that he had found with his sparkling eyes at every moment of desperation. Now I was feeling a sense of shame. The evil body that had been buried in despair opened its soulful eyes. If I could just cut that line, I would be able to fight the youngest again. My obsession was burning. Then the scene of broken Ram's fragments slowly overcoming the stillness of time followed. Although it was extremely small, the debris was moving. Ban did not consider that fact to be a big deal. In the first place, given the power that the evil spirit had, this kind of struggle was natural, and he also found out what her plan was. He probably wants to eliminate something that connects me and Brother Jean. As if it were impossible, Ban didn't even hide that he had read the evil god's plan. The evil spirit could not hear Ban's voice. Even if the sound disappears, the voice of the class resonates accurately inside everyone. Nevertheless, the reason why the evil spirit could not hear the voice of the class was because it was melting all of itself into one obsession. The determination to cut the red line. That single thought soon became a shape. Suddenly a sword appeared in the air 10 steps in front of Ban. It was Rosa Runkendel's favorite sword during her time as a madman. After the frenzy occurred, a hand was created to hold it, a body to swing the arms, and a head and face with black eyes and horns of chaos to look forward were formed. The body of the evil spirit, which had once again taken on a human-like form, was walking with difficulty in the air. He was barely walking with his sword pointed at Ban. Do you think it is possible? Ban's appearance was erased with a single sword strike. As the thunder energy that soared after Sigmund swept through Rosa, there was no trace in the air again. In this way, the evil spirit continued to form a body, and each time Ban ended it with a single blow. The evil spirit has already created a body dozens of times, but the distance between him and Ban has not narrowed even by a single step. Rather, each time the body disappeared, it only grew further and further away. Even if there is hope, not everyone can grasp it on their own. The disappearance of the evil body meant that Ram's fragments were continuously being consumed. As time passes like this, eventually there will not be a handful of souls left in this land. Ban increased his concentration. Until the very end, I had no intention of taking my time against the evil spirit. However, the moment when Sigmund slashed the body of the evil spirit about 100 times, a scream was heard from the deepest part of Ban's inner world. Ringling. And it was Jin's scream. Not even half of the 1 hour that Qual had expected had passed. Stop halfway. It really is the limit. We must stop the merger of the two gods immediately if we want to save Jean. The pool in the inner world where Jean disappeared was seething. Even Lingling was trapped and consumed by it. Lingling was convinced that stopping now was the last time Jean could save his ego. In the end, Ban stopped cutting the chest. The evil spirit led his completely battered body and ran towards the class. You're lucky. Ban did not dodge the sword of the evil spirit that came right in front of him. I just thought this as I let the sword cut the red line. I guess I'll have no choice but to leave the rest to Brother Jean and that friend. Half of it is through Jin's inner self, which I read the moment the two-body union first took place. He was finding out that he was not the first or the last hand. Please take care of Brother Jean, Black Dragon Murakan. A frenzy cut through the red line. Whoa! As if it were a lie, the sea of brain energy that had suddenly covered the ground disappeared. Only on the ground where Jean had fallen was the brain energy in the form of a protective shield that surrounded him. Was the problem that the synchronization rate was too high? Jean stood up and looked at his body. My body felt heavy, as if Taysan was weighing down my shoulders. Since he used a force several times stronger than his own in a short period of time, it was inevitable that there would be a blow. It's not to the point where I can't fight. Moreover, the damage to the evil spirit is much greater than mine. When I raised my head, I saw Ram's body so horribly broken that it was unrecognizable. In front of him was the body of a hideous body. The broken horn and melting body showed the struggle to cut the red line. Before Jean could do anything else, the body completely disappeared and scattered somewhere. What happened? Off. Is it over? The mental attack through chaos has stopped. Trembling voices spread throughout the friendly formation. Everyone was desperately praying that this terrible fight would end like this. But Orgel narrowed his eyes and shook his head. He and Jean were the first to notice that soul energy was condensing again. It appears that the evil spirit has achieved some kind of awakening. Awakening! Orgel nodded in response to Baradin's question. Okay. Achieving growth by crossing the boundary between life and death is not a blessing only available to mortals. If my prediction is correct, the evil spirit has just achieved a higher level of godhood. In return for fighting against the warrior god of the Ming dynasty by throwing gambling numbers, so does that mean you've become stronger than before? In an absolute sense, it can be seen as such. If given enough time to recover, it is true that the evil spirit will definitely become stronger. Now the spirit energy destroyed by the fighting spirit is too vast. I can guess why the fighting spirit suddenly stopped appearing, but if there had been 3 more minutes, the evil spirit would not have awakened. It's too bad it was only 3 minutes. Baradin was feeling a great sense of desolation as well as regret. Tushan almost achieved what all of humanity's greatest forces could not accomplish, even if they risked their lives together before 30 minutes had passed. Baradin began conducting again. Fortunately, the fleet did not suffer too much damage while Van was pushing the evil spirits. Colleagues on the ground were running toward Jean. Jean! Are you okay, Jean? You're the youngest. 12 horsemen. Jean, who was about to look back at them, suddenly felt a chill running down his back and quickly raised his sword. Sai-dash! A ray of black sword energy passed Jin's cheek. Next, hundreds of sword energies were attacking Jean and his colleagues. It was a sword shot by an evil spirit. His colleagues tried to step in front of Jean and spread their swords, but Jean first opened a protective shield to prevent them from stepping forward. The spirit has become more intense. Everyone please step back because you will be exposed to radiation. Youngest child, this time you really brought this mother to the brink of extinction. The evil spirit's gloomy voice was heard again. As if the body that had just melted was a fake, the evil body was floating in the air in good health. It was truly dangerous, but this time too fate did not allow anything else to come between you and me. The man named Tushan was definitely stronger than me, but in the end he couldn't finish it. Quaya. The fleet poured artillery fire at the chest. It seemed like numerous artillery hits were direct hits, but the explosion only covered the chest for a moment and was soon absorbed by the spreading black curtain and disappeared. The evil spirit looked down at Jean and smiled. I think I know a little more about your feelings now. This is the sense that fate is helping me. At this point, it's time to stop talking nonsense like that. Aren't you tired of it? Don't look forward to it. But since the situation has changed, the stage must also change. Right after the evil spirit finished speaking, Jean and his allies felt vibrations starting from beneath their feet. The ground was shaking as if it would collapse. Kuduk Kioik. The result of the shaking was not the collapse of the ground. As if the roots of a giant tree were being uprooted, the entire land began to rise. The soaring ground floated at high speed toward the fragments of ram that were stuck like dots in the air. Spread the fleet and make evasive maneuvers. Do not run into ram's fragments. The fleet spread out, increasing altitude in line with the speed at which the ground rose, and the ground troops ran like crazy to avoid ram's fragments. It took less than 10 seconds for the ground and ram's fragments to merge. In the process, there were no casualties among the ground troops, but about 20 ships and 15 dragons were hit by debris and crushed. Tenri. The area of the surface land exactly matched Ram's battlefield. The ground moved like flowing water, filling the cracks of the broken ram. The property is being repaired. The allies were once again in shock and had to find a gap in the crack and avoid it or widen it further and climb to the top of Ram. Jean swung his spiritual sword without stopping. The optical heart, like an overloaded power source, did not form brain energy properly. One by one, our allies were taking up positions above Ram. Every time something in Ram's upper part exploded, like a tumor, friendly ships or dragon troops appeared. For example, the allies rose into the sky above Ram along with the ground. The first thing that came into their sight was the dark sky and clouds. The evil spirit was standing in the middle, waiting for Jean to arrive. Ram's form, which had been repaired by merging with the ground, was not as stable as before. It was full of stains and cracks here and there like clothes made from rags, and the main gun seemed not to be functioning properly. However, the fact that this terrible ship, measuring nearly 10 ri in length, had taken shape again was enough to disturb the temporary alliance. As Orgel said, if given enough time, Ram will also become more perfect than before. Still, now was the last chance. If we don't destroy the evil spirit today, the next thing that disappears will definitely be our temporary allies and humanity. What shall we do now? The youngest. I might want to run away and wait for the moment when I can summon the god of war again. But I don't want to allow that. A storm of soul energy was swirling around the edge of Ram once again. It was impossible for the fleet to move through it, and even Orgel's portal did not work properly. I never even thought about running away. I came here today to see the end. Reiki liberation. Spiritual energy was spreading like a spider web from Jean. In an instant, the spirit cast a dark shadow over the entire area where Jean and the evil spirit were standing. At the same time, the fleet's observation wizards were confirming that the forces of chaos were pouring in from the direction of the spirit curtain that stood like a wall on all sides of Ram. Approximately 10,000 troops confirmed on the northern wall. It is made up of chaos dragons, black ships, and knights. Thunderstorm? This is the old teenage knight paddler Runkendal. After that, many armies, including the Black Knights. Okay, I was wondering why I couldn't see you. It's finally time to go to hell, Paddler. The knight who just attacked the second fleet is clearly a superhuman. Is he the head of the remaining squadron? A new army of chaos was pouring in from all the walls north, south, east, and west. It was Blue Brain King Fadler Runkendal and the remaining 4 heads of the family. Jean couldn't hear his friend's voice. Not only was the distance far away, but the spiritual energy and soul energy were now mixed between Jean and the evil spirit, blocking the sound. However, Jean sensed that a new force had arrived. I wonder if there were more hidden troops. I am also very satisfied with the fact that I have to use all my cards against you. Moreover, I had to take the risk of gaining a higher godhood. Yoop! The evil spirit who had been talking up to that point suddenly bent his back and covered his mouth. A black lump poured out and escaped between my fingers. The evil spirit's pupils widened. Satisfied? Although I stopped in the middle, it would be difficult to keep up such momentum even after receiving the evil intentions of the fighting brothers. I guess he was so caught up in his rapid growth that he didn't know exactly what state he was in. After the two gods' union was over, Jean inherited all the memories that Ban had accumulated during the battle with the evil god. Jael is a sword that rips apart the opponent's soul. Even if awakening is successful, deep wounds from the fate still remain in the body and soul of the evil body. The invisible brain energy was writhing inside the evil body. And the reinforcements left here are the same. Jean expanded his Reiki liberation even further. Tell Jean to just unleash his spiritual energy to its full potential. At the moment you need it most. Then he will appear immediately. A message sent by Misha to Jean through Cirrus and Mort before the decisive battle begins. Ka'aza. The evil spirit roared and rushed at Jean. Jean sneered without avoiding the madness in his eyes. Before the madness arrives, spiritual energy condensed in front of Jean, forming a shadow. Rough long hair down to his waist, narrow fierce eyes, and a low voice with perfect form. It's been a while, kid. It was Murakan in human form. As soon as he appeared, he showed incredible strength by grabbing the sword of the beast with his bare hands and stopping it. In situations like this, why does it always feel like the message is the same? That's good to hear, isn't it? That's right. Murakan. The evil spirit glared at Jean and Murakan with a face twisted in anger. Yes, I expected you to appear. Guardian god of the old world, last time I was busy running away. Will you fight properly today? Murakan grinned at those words and wanted to answer nicely, but he had no choice but to sound a little embarrassed. Atet. This was because the soul energy spread from the frenzied sword body was penetrating into the hands. Murakan was astonished and took a step back like a person on fire. At that point, even the evil spirit was dumbfounded for a moment. Jean reflexively touched his forehead. Well, I forgot for a moment that the chest is the source of soul energy infection. No one saw this just now, right? Jean shrugged his shoulders but felt relief inside when he saw Murakan acting like an idiot as soon as he arrived. The fact that he wasn't serious meant that he wasn't so threatening that the other person couldn't handle it. Tisk dash. Murakan stretched out his fist with all his might towards the evil spirit. The shock wave caused by the clash of fists and swords caused a huge spirit energy to surround the three people. Murakan, unlike the Jin or the Ming dynasty, does not have complete immunity to marriage. Nevertheless, because the power of the main body is so great, it is impossible to infect him with a moderate blow. Although he did not completely return, he was closer to his prime than during the first general offensive. The evil spirit retreated first. Murakan created a mass of soul energy in both hands and fired wildly at the evil spirit who had widened the distance. Haha, I just didn't have time back then. Shall I fear what is yours? Oh well. It stings terribly. After saying that, Murakan quickly whispered to Jin again. Child, actually we don't have much time this time either. You know? Misha said that would happen. Currently Murakan's absence is synonymous with Soderet's absence. If he was absent from the realm of God, for a long time the order of the world regarding shadows was bound to collapse in an instant. But I think you can finish it on your own if I just give you some time to recover and then leave. Because I'm already pretty hurt. It took a lot of hard work to make it like that. Now Murakan is imbued with the divinity of Soderet. Therefore he was seeing areas that could not be seen with mortal eyes. As long as Jin's body was healthy, Jin could easily deal with the evil spirit alone. It wasn't me, it was my half-brother who did it. First protect me for a minute. Are you coming? Whoa! Murakan transformed into his true form and spread his wings. The evil spirit was filled with venom and poured sword energy at Murakan. A fierce battle was taking place outside. Unlike before, Paidler showed no lag at all in the face of Vale, and the newly appeared army of chaos was too large. Above all, the problem was the mental attack through soul energy and the number of Black Knights. The allies are starting to think that the evil spirit has resurrected all of Runkendal's previous Black Knights. The 4 squadron heads were effectively commanding all the Black Knights. However, Jin and Murakan do not have the energy to worry about the outside world. Jin took out a gem that looked like a round ruby from his pocket. An object that looks similar to a wavelength tracking synchronizer but has a completely different purpose and name. Blood of Numerous. It was a new item I received from Jeep in advance in preparation for the decisive battle. Although Jin was not mortally wounded or on the verge of death, he did not hesitate to put the blood in his mouth and chew it. It was used simply to recover stamina and fight the evil spirit again at full strength. It was a fight worth it. Even if it wasn't blood, it was tears. Wow! As God's blood filled his mouth, Jin felt his sense of exhaustion rapidly disappearing. His eyes were alive and his heart was pumping blood to every corner of his body at a crazy pace. My muscles tensed up as if they might explode at any moment, and my senses became infinitely sharper. The darkened light heart gradually regained its original light. After exactly 1 minute, Jin was able to hold the sword again in a more perfect condition than ever. The aura wrapped around Jin's body, forming a dazzling protective shield. Then magical power swirled and spread everywhere, and aura surrounded Bradamanti. The summoning door was opening through magical power that spread like a curtain. Gag! The dead world of the evil god's castle has already completely broken down into Ram's parts, so Tess can be summoned again. Oh, what a surprise! When you call this guy, at least give me some advice. As Tess breathed fire, spiritual energy and aura were added accordingly. Burning fire and eternalization. The 2 fires symbolizing Runkendal's magic sword were pushing back the gathering chaos. Like Misha, Murakan cannot combine burning flame with dark spirit without spirituality, but simply added a huge amount of spiritual energy to strengthen burning fire. What is currently stabbing the chest is probably not just a sword. Jin, the will of fire that has continued for 1,000 years in the history of Runkendal, gritted his teeth as he twisted the sword that pierced the chest of the evil god. Gasp! My family, my home, my dead brothers, countless innocent people, dead and destroyed by your hands. Jin was screaming in anger without even realizing it. The strongest Runkendal in history? A family that is not threatened by anything? What you were trying to do was something that even your father Timar and Tushin could not accomplish. Look at the results of your running wild without knowing the topic. The Garden of Swords has been shattered and the Knight's clans are... Shut up. If my family was that important, I should never have left this place. You and Soren. My choice was not wrong. Asleep. What drove Jean crazy was the fact that even if he killed the evil spirit, things that had already been broken couldn't come back. I couldn't keep my composure and fight. It didn't matter. Now I was confident that I could kill the evil body by tearing it into 1,000 pieces. But even if he did that, his anger would not be resolved. The pain of those left behind by those who had already died under the evil spirit would not disappear. Squeak! Jean cut the sword stuck in it horizontally. The evil spirit immediately recovered and appeared to absorb the eternal fire like the first time. With evil eyes in his eyes, Jean plunged the blade into the same spot, once more twisted and cut. When the evil spirit tried to dodge, Murakin forced her to move. One by one wounds appeared on Jean and Murakin's bodies. Blood and spiritual energy mixed together and colored the air. As the fire continued, Runkendal's decisive battles and secret weapons were clashing non-stop. A meteor shower and a black meteor shower struck at the same time, and sword and black sword energy flew towards each other's necks at a speed close to the speed of light, confusing the vision. Falling flowers, Zhong Wang, black cross, annular shape, Watchin and Watchin. Swords that would have shattered the strong bodies of superhumans and the bodies of gods were striking those who had once been hats. They were stabbing and cutting each other. My breathing became difficult and my throat continued to swell and blood poured out. While the bloody fight continued for about 30 minutes, the evil spirit lost his body more than 20 times. Even if you cut off the head, split the body in half, scatter it into pieces, and burn it without a trace, the evil spirit was resurrected and regenerated endlessly. Can a family be rebuilt and revived so persistently? Will this family called Runkendal, which already has only a few members left, be able to rebuild after this battle is over? Sometimes when such questions arise, Jin's eyes become watery. I will definitely do that, but more than ever I miss the sights that I will never see again. The dark and cold Garden of Swords, where there was no place for my previous life. The cold and harsh people who treated me in my past life. The cruel family that he had no choice but to leave in his previous life. I felt like my heart was going to rot because I missed those painful memories. If someone were to take away his privilege of returning and return Runkendal to those times, even if he was exiled and ended up silently dying somewhere because he was unable to meet Valeria. If he had a choice, Jean would definitely nod. I wish I could just live a miserable and shabby life and disappear, so please give me my family back. Because that will never happen and I will never be given that opportunity. I will kill you and shoulder a heavy duty. The duty of Runkendal. The duty to recreate a land in the world where Runkendal can stand tall. Jean swung his sword while muttering to himself that the evil spirit and Murakin could not understand. The body that had recovered from numerous blood was heavy, as if it had been submerged in water again. The body was also slow to regenerate, and the body was not formed quickly. No one in the world. No one would want to kill their mother. You wouldn't want to be the child of a mother like this, and you wouldn't want to be doomed to having to save the world from a mother like this. It was the same with Jean. He never wanted a future like this. We are just fighting against it because it is a point of force majeure that leaves us with no choice but to accept fate. Just getting over it. Ka-a-wak. Jean screams and swings his Bradamanti. The fire disappeared and Tess returned to the flame world. Murakin still remained and used his whole body to block Jin's spirit from getting hurt further. Squeak! The black blade wrapped in spirit clawed at the chest of the evil spirit. Then for the first time the evil spirit vomited red blood that was not soul energy. It was spitting out fresh blood like a human being. For the first time the eternal fire that continued to be absorbed left a faint blue ember on the evil spirit's chest. The evil spirit grabbed the fire. Sigh! The evil spirit let out a heavy breath mixed with a hissing sound. The horns and 2 wings of the trembling body were slowly melting. The spirit wrapped around the body falls to the floor like ugly scales. In the end, the eternal fire that burned the chest of the evil spirit began to dispel its spirit. As each second passed, the evil spirit became closer and closer to its human appearance. Jean didn't bother to suppress his mixed feelings and aimed his sword. And I felt it intuitively. This fight will ultimately end in a fight against the evil spirit alone without Bando Muraken or any other companions. Is the kid okay? As Jean nodded, the storm of spirit surrounding the three people continued to fluctuate. The storm shackled the three people in an instant. This is the last struggle. If I use this much spirit in that state, there will be no next time. There's still some time left for me, so I'll just get through it, and when my spirit subsides it'll be over. No, Muraken. You go out first. What? Why? The battlefield outside is being pushed back. Go and help. Because this spirit can't harm me anyway. Muraken was about to say something, but when he saw Jean putting his hand into the storm of spirit, he shrugged his wings. Unlike before, the storm of soul energy did not cause any damage to Jean at all. It's the last one-on-one. As always, I will win, so I am waiting to save at least one more person. You are the guardian deity of Runkendal. I have to play a role that suits him. Jean said that and slowly walked towards the evil spirit. Ah, this little guy. Even though he says he's going to fight alone, I don't feel anxious for some reason. The stamina recovered through numerous blood would have run out again, and the evil spirit may still have some hidden secrets left. Still, I didn't feel anxious at all watching Jin's back as he walked towards the evil body with great strides. Beyond that, it was unthinkable for Jean to be defeated by the evil god. The reason is unknown. A conviction that is difficult to explain just comes to me as an intuition. Jin's Runkendal is just brighter than the evil god's Runkendal. You've grown a lot while I haven't seen you. Muraken turned around and exhaled in a storm of soul energy. The breath pierced one side of the storm like tearing a piece of paper, creating an entrance for Muraken to exit. After the fight is over, I probably won't be there. Still, we will meet again soon, so I will take care of the strawberry pie and wait for you. Go out and confess in person. Gilly will be fighting too. What kind of childish confession? No, you crazy kid. Did you bring strawberry pie here too? In this dangerous place? They said they definitely want to participate in the war. But still. Oh, I have to go quickly. In fact, Gilly had not yet fully recovered from the injuries sustained in the last battle, so he could not participate. Muraken hurriedly escaped the storm without seeing Jin's smile. Strawberry pie. At the sound of Muraken's voice that shook the entire battlefield, everyone on the outer battlefield looked up at the sky. And seeing Muraken staring at the ground with his wings wide open, not only the enemies but also the allies were instantly overwhelmed. No one who harmed my strawberry pie will ever live here and set foot on the earth again. No one will ever let this Muraken live. What are you saying? What is strawberry pie? Why did you leave the 12 riders and come out alone? Anyone would be embarrassed by the sudden confession heard in the midst of life and death. Colleagues who had a quick grasp of the situation touched their foreheads in embarrassment, and their allies became confused as they tried to understand what he meant. But Muraken's power is real. A powerful force capable of pulling back friendly troops out of danger at once and ruthlessly crushing enemies. As Muraken roared with wrath once more, the Chaos Knights fell down one by one and grabbed their heads. Even though his body was unable to feel pain, he was crushed by the black dragon called Muraken. Among our allies, those who lacked mental strength were hit by Muraken's roar. There were allies who collapsed with blood pouring from every hole in their faces. However, it was never an act that put our allies in further danger. Rather, it was closer to a kind of shock therapy. All of those who fell were losing consciousness due to the evil spirit's mental attack until they heard Muraken's roar. Even though it was painful, the roar was awakening them from the mental attack. That's incredible power. Has it regained its full strength from its prime? Zephyrin said in a trembling voice. She was shivering at Muraken's energy. No, it's close, but it's still nowhere near what it was 1,000 years ago. Zephyrin suppressed her surprise at Orgel's answer. Really, Master? Okay. Do you now understand why I told you never to fight with Muraken, even when I was fine? It works. Go and assist Muraken, Zephyrin. This does not mean to add strength, but to use strength to protect allies so that he can fight more freely. Zephyrin's eyes widened. Orgel was implying that just like that the war would end in victory. All right. Zephyrin flew near Murakan, and Baradin, who opened the demon stone again, came out from Zifil's side. As soon as he confirmed Murakan's power, he also had the same thoughts as Orgel. Through insight derived from Sodaret's godhead, Murakan immediately recognized him as Baradin and not Kiliak. Murakan knew what Jean thought of Baradin, so he gave him a short, heavy word. You will be able to come back again, Baradin Jifil. So you shouldn't commit too many sins before then. Baradin did not respond but spread his magic widely and created a protective shield. After the decisive battle, I need to check the conditions for Tushan and Murakan's manifestation as quickly as possible and prepare for war. I was also distraught. It was already shocking enough when Tushan appeared, but if Murakan was still alive, Jeep's fate was bound to be difficult after today. Rather strawberry pie. If you are talking about Jin's nanny, she did not participate in this battlefield in the first place. I'm a bit out of shape after being tricked by that damn little bastard. It doesn't matter. Rather good. Now that I know that the strawberry pie is safe, let's calmly take care of them. Black chains made of spiritual energy stretched out from Murakan's two wings. Thousands of black chains waved in the sky like ominous tentacles. Reiki liberation, black chains word. Like a shower, the chains of spiritual energy all hit Ram's upper body. Even though such huge chains were falling, there was no sound at all. Ram's upper part was hit, and the only thing that followed was a burst of explosions. The chaotic troops quickly lost their formation as they tried to avoid the chains. Oh, are those the resurrected former patriarchs? Of the numerous chains, only 4 failed to stick to Ram's upper part and were cut or thrown off. The last 4 remaining Sentai clan heads were struck down with their swords. However, the effect was extremely minimal. All they did was knock off one of the many chains that fell on their side. Kid. No, since Runkindle's 12th rider and Sagaju are not there, I'll tell the story for you. I will take away the privilege given to you called Runkindle. As soon as Murakan finished speaking, Ram's upper body began to seethe with spiritual energy. Spiritual energy was rising like bubbles from the impaled chains. Those who follow the 12 horsemen should not avoid spiritual energy. The allies who were reflexively trying to avoid the bubbles stopped moving. Even if the spiritual energy touched them, there was no other harm to them. On the other hand, the enemies trapped in the bubble were melting away, just like sand sinks in the sea and turns into mud. Liberation of Reiki is the beginning and end of dealing with shadows. Murakan was now showing one part of the end of Reiki. Simply making the opponent disappear into one's shadow without even doing anything that could be called a fight or battle. The black chain that had reached its peak possessed such power. Among the chaotic troops trapped in the bubble, those who could be called elite were maintaining their form by resisting spiritual energy. But it's only a matter of time. If the forces of chaos fail to resist like this, all enemies will soon be buried in their own shadows and reduced to nothing. It seemed like a huge sieve was filtering out the impurities called chaos. Runkindle's riders listen. Taking the heads of those who were the previous head of the family is what you must do, so move quickly. Brothers Mary and Tana raised their swords towards the sky. I will accept it. Hey Mary, can I wear it too? Then Jonah, kill that guy over there. Tana guys are left and right and I am in charge of the center. Hee hee. There was no need for the riders to engage in fierce battles as they arrived at their respective squadron heads. The previous head of the family was already trapped in a black chain and could not even move properly. The reason Murakan ordered the children of Runkindle to kill them was for symbolism. We want to show everyone that the current Runkindle can cut out its rotten roots and move forward again. The black chain showed no signs of stopping. Rather, it was getting deeper and deeper with no end in sight. Murakan even unleashed not only the black chain but also another ultimate skill of spiritual energy liberation. Then suddenly the upper center of the ram opened like an eye, revealing the main gun that was thought to be completely destroyed. The other main gun that Ram was hiding spewed black fire straight at Murakan without any sign of reloading. It was a similar power to what Ram showed before being crushed by Ban. However, Murakan held his breath with all his might and took the bombardment without any hesitation. Murakan's breath bisected the huge black beam that shot out from Ram in half. Ram's bombardment split like rotten wood and scattered fragments all over the battlefield. Zephyr and Baradin and the heroes of In spread shields to protect their allies from the debris. Murakan's breath not only tore up the artillery barrage, but also deflected the hideous gun, creating a huge hole in Ram's upper part. Nevertheless, Murakan seemed dissatisfied and thought to himself, "I shot it with as much power as I could muster, but that's the only thing that broke? If I do this, I'll look weaker than the king of fighters." Tushin even completely destroyed this ship while it was still intact. Of course, contrary to Murakan's intentions, the allies were engulfed in astonishment as they looked down at the hole that had opened up like a 1,000-mile cliff. Now this body's time is almost over. Everyone get up and fight again. Show that you can end the war safely even if this black dragon Murakan leaves. The allies who had stopped raised their swords and staffs again. I spat out the blood that had accumulated in my mouth, adjusted the broken bones, and roughly bandaged the torn wounds. Everyone was already moving even before Murakan's order. All of our allies had both hope and evil on their faces. Murakan last looked at the sky beyond where Vale and Paddler were fighting. The reason why the fight between the two was taking place far away from the central battlefield was because Paddler led them to do so. Fadler Runkendal, I wanted to save that guy for a long time. It was visible in Murakan's eyes. The chains of chaos bound to the Paddler's heart. Even Paddler was now aware of the existence of a chain bound to his heart. I just didn't tell them because I thought it was too late. Give Sarah my regards, Paddler. There was sadness in Murakan's eyes as he began to return to the realm of God. 50%. During Murakan's brief stay on the battlefield, approximately 50% of the enemies disappeared. Jonah Mary and Tana's brother beheaded the previous head of the family. Even though the black chains had already disappeared, they failed to put up even a single resistance. The enemy's formation was collapsing. The allies desperately dug for loopholes, swinging their swords and firing magic. The fight continues again. But now the temporary alliance had a clear advantage. Casualties were pouring in, but the enemy was falling far more than that. Victory is just around the corner. Stay alert until the end. Is there any news from the 12 horsemen yet? Whenever the allies had a moment, they looked towards the curtain of spirit that was imprisoning Jean and the evil spirit. The curtain was significantly smaller than when Murakan first broke through. Seemed so narrow that two people couldn't even stand. Did Jean enter a new subspace with the evil spirit? Valeria narrowed her eyes as she looked at the record window. The record window contained information that Jean and Hungshin had left the battlefield. I was worried. After using the wavelength tracking synchronization device and even calling Murakan, Jean had no tricks left. Enya, who realized what was going on, grabbed Valeria's hand. Confucius, Jean will definitely come back. Valeria widened her eyes for a moment and smiled at Enya. Wow, seeing Valeria smile is truly precious. She's already pretty, but her smile makes her even more. Should I make another fan club? Anyway, Prince Jean, don't worry and help me. Please use this. Enya took out the mirror from her bosom. The spirit that surrounds people continues to narrow. If it's a mirror-reinforced firewall, it might be able to slow it down a little bit. As the spirit grew tighter, Ram was sinking little by little. The altitude was not being lowered under any control. It is losing its function due to the destruction caused by Murakan's breath and the ongoing battle. People and monsters on a crashing giant ship. Enya opened the mirror, hoping that all of them would survive safely. Valeria was assisting her by reading the infinite flow of magic power. Slowly, the traces of the subspace that trapped Jean and the evil spirit were receding. Even as the ship sank, there was no trace of subspace hanging in the sky. The comrades continued to faithfully carry out their duties, thinking about how they would be fighting alone. Jean was facing the evil spirit. At first it was a gigantic monster similar to Gleek, and after it merged with Ram it became stained with chaos and took on a devil-like appearance with horns and wings. The current evil body had the appearance that Jean was most familiar with. Calmly flowing black hair, a cold hard gaze, and a straight waist that looks like it won't be broken by anything. The appearance of a person who has led the family as the mistress of Runkendal for a long time. Unlike when he encountered young Rosa in the evil god's castle, Jean was no longer embarrassed by the evil god's change. For some reason if I followed you in I thought you would look like this. Not even the slightest tremor could be found in Jin's sword aimed at the evil spirit. The passionate emotions that had been building up just now had become the will to kill the opponent like a sword being sharpened. The evil spirit stared at Jin in silence for a while. Jin felt that the aura was not forming. The same was true for magical power and spiritual energy. No special powers could be used in this subspace. But I wasn't afraid. Even if he had to fight barehanded without a sword, he was confident that he would not die here. What a lonely sight. The evil spirit said. It was a desolate voice like a death row inmate who had accepted the future and was on the execution ground. The subspace where the two were standing was completely white, unlike anything they had experienced so far. A vast and empty white desert. This is the end of the subconscious, the inner world of evil spirits. I'm suddenly curious about what your space looks like. You won't feel so empty and cold like me. Because I didn't live like you. There was no anger mixed in Jin's voice as he answered. No. Your life and mine are still similar, youngest child. It's just not quite the same. Where do you think that small difference comes from? Is it because you want to fight? Yes. It's terrible. Even if I were reborn, I have no confidence in living a more intense life than I do now. I don't have the confidence to make a choice that doesn't turn me into an evil spirit. He truly gave everything for his family. He controlled all his desires throughout his life, never put his personal life before his family, and never once complained. In that lonely and cold time, the method is wrong. What is the right way? And that's something even a criminal like me can do? What if I don't get the chance to go back and live a new life with my memories like you? Jin was not embarrassed even when the evil spirit spoke of his return. I guessed that death had revealed a secret to God who must now disappear. I've always had one question about you. Why did you banish me in my past life and stop eating for 2 days? The evil spirit burst into laughter. You are asking the obvious. Did you think I wasn't a person? I also feel sad, fall into depression and struggle with pain. I want to be with my husband and hug my children. But that doesn't mean the Runkendal family can become stronger. That is not the way of a sword family called Runkendal, but the way of an ordinary family. Jin closed his eyes tightly once. I am not a monster, youngest. I was just thrown into a position where I had to become a monster. Even before I accepted chaos, I was already a monster. It had to happen that way. It's not a matter of whether I choose or not. I have never had the power to make decisions about my life. That's the difference between you and me. Transparent tears flowed from the eyes of the evil spirit who continued his words like that. I fought life as hard as I could, but I lost. I could not overcome my inevitable fate. The difference arises from differences in the capabilities we were born with and the opportunities we were given. The evil spirit slowly pulled out the frenzy from the scabbard. It's not unfair, because not everyone can realize their dreams and not everyone can fulfill their assigned duties. No matter how intense it is, there are some things that cannot be helped. Of course, I have no desire to make excuses. I just want to tell someone to you. It would be better if you failed as a human being and stayed a human being instead of becoming an evil spirit. Even if it eventually pushed the family into decline. I probably felt a little sympathy for your story right now. Maybe so. Even if I couldn't forgive you, I would have tried to understand. But I still don't want that. Now we cannot know what a person's heart is or what choices a person should make. I don't want to deny my terrible past, and I certainly don't want to justify my sins. Now I just want to fight with you and fall apart. Chong dash. A frenzy fell into Jin's chest. It was heavy. Jin didn't know if it was the frenzy that was heavy or something else that was heavy. I just had to shake it off and cut and stab it. The youngest. This fight is closer to a blessing to me. The last of my humanity cursed me as it died in your arms. Now I desperately hope that the curse will come true. Do you know why? Because pain is better than solitude. This time Jin pushed the blade into the evil spirit's throat. There was blood on the blade that grazed Pit's neck. Hot red blood drops kept disturbing my vision. It felt like I was cutting a person, not a monster. The feeling that I was finally able to bond with a human being, not a monster. However, Jean thought this was not a win. In fact, the evil spirit had already been defeated by life even before giving birth to Jean. Because even before Jean grew up, he was already a monster. It was impossible to defeat someone who had already been defeated a long time ago. That person is not here. Of the two swords tangled in silence, one belonged to a human living in the present, and the other was merely a trace of a person who had disappeared in the past. In the endless fighting, the wounds on Jean and Hyungsun's bodies increased. They were covered in each other's blood, to the point where I feel like I want to stop fighting. The evil spirit stretched out his sword desperately. Even though my whole body was egged, I had no hesitation. Jean felt that she was selfish to the end. Even though they were brutally abused, it feels strange when their parents die. As if unavoidable suffering is coming. I don't know how much the fight was. Jean was kneeling on one knee, leaning on his sword and looking down at his chest. Whoops, whoops. The fallen beast was out of breath. He kept opening his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but only blood foam came out instead of a voice. Jean had no strength left to take his last breath. Jean had to take a deep breath and quietly observe the fate of the evil spirit. The evil spirit's consciousness was fading away. Jean never took his eyes off the evil spirit. I held on to my fading spirit to witness that death. In the end, the evil spirit was unable to leave a will to Jean. The moment when the evil spirit runs out of breath. What? Suddenly a white light spread and Jean reflexively closed his eyes. When I opened my eyes for the first time in a long time, the blue sky of Jupiter enveloped me. Jean was falling towards the ground without even being able to lift a finger. It has escaped from subspace. One by one people's voices reached Jin's ears as he fell. I could hear the mournful calls of my colleagues. Jean! A wisp of magical power as warm as a warm breeze enveloped Jean. It was Valeria's magic power. Jean was gently pulled by the wind's magic and fell into Valeria's arms. And Jean could see the image of Valeria and her colleagues looking at her face and shouting something urgently. The garden of swords spread out behind it. Jean closed his eyes, checking the scenery that remained unharmed.